Lesson 9-10, percent of change. And in this lesson, you learn to find the percent of increase or decrease. Why is it important? Because understanding percent of decrease can help you determine discount prices as well, just like in 9-9. So a real world application for this will be electricity rates. Take a look at this news item here. Rate hike announced. The Consolidated Edison Company of New York announced that they will be raising rates on May 1, 1995. The increase will generate 55.1 million. That represents a 1.1% increase. A typical customer in an apartment that uses a 300 kilowatt a month will see an increase in his or her monthly bill from $50.52 to $51.26. A Westchester customer using a 450 kilowatt hour in a month will pay $71.05 instead of $70.05. So define the percent of increase for each customer and compare your answers to 1.1% amount the company stated. So we will solve this in the last example, example number 3. What it's saying is this: we want to find out if it's really true that $50.52 raising to $51.21 is a 1.1% increase. Okay, and the same thing with $71.05, $71.05 to $70.05. Okay, so before we do that, let's learn the concept. Newspapers often report changes in prices and rates as a percent of change. The percent of change is the ratio of the amount of change to the original amount. Again, it's the ratio to the amount of change to the original amount. So if I were to write this, okay, as a ratio, so the percent of change, okay, is the ratio of the amount of change okay, to the original amount. Okay, and let's take a look at finding the percent of change. On example 1, find the percent of change from $120 to $135. Again, we have two methods to do this. The two methods you can use to find the percent of change. Method number 1, step 1 is to subtract. To find the amount of change, we get the bigger number, subtract the smaller number, which will be 15. Okay, and step number 2, solve the percent, okay, equation. Compare the amount of increase to the original amount. So again, we use P equals RB, okay, and 15, equals R times 120, okay. So this becomes 15 over 120, okay, over 15 over 120 is equal to 120R over 120 because we divide both sides by 120 to solve for R. Okay, and we end up with R equals 0.125. So the percent of change, multiplying it by 100, remember, capital R will represent the percent as a decimal. And then to convert into that percent, simply move it 2 spaces to the right or multiply it by 100. So the percent of change is 12 over 12.5%. Okay, and method 2 is what I just mentioned in terms of the amount of change and original amount. If you look at method 1, and if we follow the formula amount of change over original amount, so this will become our amount of change right here, 15. Okay, so if in the percent of change, this is another formula which you can use. Percent of change is equal to amount of change okay, all over original amount, just like what I mentioned up there. And then all you need to do is multiply it by 100 to get that. So another way of doing this is that to be able to get this answer right here, the amount of change is 15. over the original amount, which is, okay, it went from 120 to 135, so this is our original amount right here, 120. So if it's 15 over 120 multiplied by 100, and if you notice, you'll get the same answer right there. So if you memorize this formula, you are already good to go for method number 1. In method number 2, there's another way of doing this. Divide the new amount by the original amount. Okay, so we have 135 divided by 120. Okay, will give you 1.125. And step number 2, after dividing the original amount by the after dividing the new amount by the original amount, subtract 1 from the result. So all you need to do is subtract 1 and write the decimal as a percent. So you subtract 1, 1.125, subtract 1, you end up with 0.125, and then make it into a percent by moving the decimal 2 spaces to the right, end up with 12.5%. So the percent of change is 12.5%. So there are 2 ways to do this, method 1 or method 2. It's up to you what method you want to use. Okay, and before we go to example number 2, we need to take a look at percent of increase and percent of decrease. When an amount increases, like in example 1, the percent of change is percent of increase. When the amount decreases, obviously, the percent of change is negative. You can state that the negative percent of change as a percent of decrease. So how do we apply this? Let's take a look at example 2. Find the percent of decrease from a population of 257,000 to 243,000 using method 1. Okay, we subtract 243 minus 257 will give us negative 14. That tells you right away when you have a negative answer, it's a percent of decrease. Okay, so method 2, remember our formula. Okay, again, our formula for percent of change would be amount of change, okay, all over original amount, and multiply the whole thing by 100. So in this case, we already have our amount of change, which is negative 14, original amount, from population of 257. So 257, and simply multiply that by 100. Now, okay, let's follow what the book is saying. Solve the percent equation. Okay, compare the amount of change to the original amount. So if you solve the percent equation using P equals RB, then we have negative 14 over 257. Okay, same thing. Divide both sides by 257. End up with negative 0.54. And you simply multiply that by 100. You'll get negative 5.4%. So this becomes now negative 5.4%. Okay, so that one divided by that one multiplied by 100. Okay, so method number 2 is basically getting your dividing the new amount by the original amount. The new amount is 243. Divide that by the original amount, which is 257.946. And then remember in method 2, we subtract 1 from the result, so we get that number, and then you subtract 1. End up with negative 0.054. We'll make it into a percent by moving the decimal 2 spaces to the right. You end up with negative 5.4%. Okay, so the percent of change is 5.4%, or negative 5.4%, or you can also restate it as the percent of decrease is 5.4%. So when you put in the word decrease, the negative actually goes away. So you can say the percent of change is negative 5.4%, and or the percent of decrease is 5.4%. So when you add on the word decrease, you take away negative sign. And same thing here. Okay, so the percent of decrease is 5.4%. And let's take a look at example number 3. Okay, so let's take a look at the beginning of the lesson, and let's see if the newspaper article was correct. So apartment bill using method 1. subtract 51.26 minus 50.52, and end up with 0.74. We estimate 1 over 50 is around 2%, so it should be around close to 2%, our answer. To solve the percent equation, again, we use our percent of our formula, okay, 0.74 divided by the original amount, which is 50.52, multiply that by 100, okay, will give us 1.5%. So the percent of increase is about 1.5%. Okay? And the Westchester bill, okay, we use method 2 this time. So we divide the new amount by the original amount. And the new amount is $71.05. The original amount is $70.05. Okay, it's approximately 1.014 when you divide that using a calculator. And then we simply subtract that, end up with around 0.0014, or around 1.4%. So the percent of increase is 1.4%. Now, if you notice, this is 1.5%, this is a 1.4%. So the apartment bill rose 1.5%, and the Westchester bill rose 1.4%, not 1.1% as estimated by the power company. So if you take it as it is and you don't know how to do this, somebody might be taking you for a ride without you knowing it. Okay? So that's how you find percent of increase and percent of decrease, and I gave you a formula for that. And the secret word for this particular lesson would be education. The secret word is education. Thank you for watching.